I felt angry because, like I said, you knew what you did, and for you to reach out, it's like, what are you trying to cover? You thought that you were going to get away with killing my sister?
On the afternoon of February 9th, 2024, police officers in Baldwin Borough, Pennsylvania, responded to a call at an apartment on Young Ridge Drive. Inside, they discovered 20-year-old RaMiah Griffin lying motionless, shot multiple times. In another room, her 1-year-old daughter was found unharmed. The scene raised immediate questions. Who would target a young mother inside her own home? Why was her child left alive? Investigators quickly began piecing together a timeline. Witness statements, surveillance footage, and interviews pointed them toward a suspect, 22-year-old Adelina Tongwa, the father of Griffin's child. Outwardly, the pair maintained a co-parenting relationship after ending their romantic involvement. To friends and neighbors, the arrangement appeared functional. Yet behind closed doors, accounts from Griffin's family suggested hidden conflicts and controlling behavior. As details emerged, the case took shape. The homicide charge against Tongwa placed focus on the nature of their relationship. What disputes had occurred in the weeks leading up to Griffin's death? What triggered the violence on that particular day? Why was the child left at the scene? This case is not only about a single act of violence but also about the chain of events leading to it. How does a relationship transition from parenting cooperation to fatal confrontation? What evidence convinced police to make their arrest? And what unanswered questions remain? You're watching Global Crime Venue, where viral fame hides chilling secrets. From TikTok dancers and Instagram couples to rising Facebook personalities, we reveal the dark side of the spotlight. When the perfect posts turn into tragedies, we break down exactly how it all unraveled. These aren't just online stories. They're real cases with real victims. And while you're here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new case breakdown. In our next episode, we'll dive into another shocking story of love, control, and a hidden danger that no one saw coming. Here's the untold side of what really happened. RaMiah Griffin was a 20-year-old woman living in Baldwin Borough, Pennsylvania, at the time of her death in February 2024. She grew up in the Pittsburgh area and graduated from Fox High School, where she was remembered by teachers and peers as reliable and sociable. Her upbringing in the community connected her to a wide circle of friends, many of whom later spoke about her as someone who could be counted on for support. Griffin became a mother at a young age. She gave birth to a daughter during her relationship with Adelina Tongwa, who would later become the primary suspect in her homicide. The birth of her daughter marked a turning point in her life. Although her romantic relationship with Tongwa ended not long after, the two continued to have contact through a co-parenting arrangement. This arrangement meant that Griffin was frequently in contact with him, coordinating custody and care for their child. At the time of her death, Griffin was navigating the challenges of early adulthood while raising her daughter. She was not publicly known for involvement in disputes or conflicts, but she was managing the responsibilities of parenting, household life, and the day-to-day requirements of caring for a young child. Friends and family described her as someone with consistent routines, focused on her daughter's upbringing. Her apartment on Young Ridge Drive in Baldwin Borough was a stable living arrangement where she resided with her child. Her family, particularly her sister Mariah, was closely involved in her life. They frequently spent time together, and her sister later expressed that she and Remy had a strong bond. Family involvement meant that her daughter was not only cared for by Griffin but also had the support of extended relatives, who were prepared to step in when needed. RaMiah Griffin and Adelina Tongwa were involved in a relationship that spanned roughly 4 years. Their partnership ended after the birth of their daughter, but their connection continued through shared parental responsibilities. Following their breakup, they established a co-parenting arrangement that required ongoing communication and interaction. On the surface, this arrangement appeared manageable. To outsiders, their coordination over childcare seemed civil. They were seen exchanging their daughter during visitation and discussing routine matters, which gave the impression of cooperation. However, Information from Griffin's immediate family contradicted this outward appearance. According to Griffin's sister, Mariah, the private reality of the relationship was more concerning. She described Itongwa as controlling and indicated that his behavior raised suspicions within the family. These concerns were not widely recognized beyond their circle, as there were no public records of police reports, restraining orders, or legal disputes between the two prior to the incident. Nonetheless, the family believed that underlying tensions existed and that disagreements occurred in private. The parenting arrangement itself created repeated opportunities for conflict. Each exchange of their child and every decision regarding her care brought Griffin and Itongwa into direct contact. These ongoing interactions meant that, even though their romantic relationship had ended, they continued to engage with one another regularly. Such circumstances can increase the likelihood of disputes, especially when one party seeks control over decisions or outcomes. Investigators later identified this dynamic as significant. Law enforcement considered the nature of their co-parenting when reviewing the case, as Griffin's continued involvement with Itongwa placed him among the first individuals to examine closely. Surveillance evidence and witness accounts eventually established him as a suspect, and his role as the father of Griffin's child positioned him centrally in the investigation. Additional information surfaced after Griffin's death that further highlighted the strained nature of their relationship. Family members reported that while Itongwa was present at Griffin's funeral, he remained isolated and avoided communication with others. His behavior during this period drew attention, particularly because his arrest occurred shortly afterward, around the same time a custody hearing for their daughter was scheduled. This raised questions about whether legal custody issues may have added pressure to an already strained relationship. As investigators began examining the circumstances leading up to the death of RaMiah Griffin, they focused not only on the crime itself but also on indicators that preceded it. According to statements from Griffin's family, particularly her sister, there were concerns about the behavior of Adeline Itongwa. She described him as shady and controlling, noting that his conduct often appeared different in private compared to what outsiders observed. While the public image of their co-parenting arrangement seemed cooperative, relatives suggested there were signs of conflict behind the scenes. These accounts highlight a recurring challenge in domestic cases: the difference between outward appearances and private interactions. Control can manifest in subtle ways, such as influence over decisions, monitoring activities, or attempts to direct aspects of another person's life. While Griffin did not make public complaints or file legal documents alleging such behavior, her family's statements suggest that these dynamics may have existed. Another red flag was the lack of protective measures. No records indicate that Griffin sought restraining orders, police intervention, or other legal protections before her death. This absence leaves open questions. Did she avoid formal action because she felt the situation could be managed, or because concerns were not recognized as dangerous until later? Without official reports, early warning signs remained within private knowledge, making it more difficult for outsiders to assess the risks. The timing of the case also raised attention. Itongwa's arrest occurred on the same day that a custody hearing for their daughter was scheduled. Investigators noted this overlap as a potential point of tension. Custody disputes can escalate underlying conflicts, especially when parents disagree over visitation, decision-making, or long-term responsibilities. While it is not publicly confirmed whether the hearing itself played a direct role in the events, its timing remains a significant detail in evaluating potential stressors. Neighbors added another layer to the timeline by reporting that gunshots were likely heard in the early hours of the morning, although Griffin's body was not discovered until later that afternoon. This discrepancy highlights a period of uncertainty about what took place in those intervening hours. It raises the question of whether there was any opportunity for intervention, or if the events unfolded too quickly to be prevented. On February 9, 2024, Baldwin Borough police were dispatched to an apartment on Young Ridge Drive after receiving a call requesting a welfare check. When officers entered, they discovered 20-year-old RaMiah Griffin unresponsive with multiple gunshot wounds. She was pronounced dead at the scene. In a separate room, her 1-year-old daughter was located unharmed. The discovery immediately shifted the scene into a homicide investigation. Investigators worked to establish a precise timeline. Neighbors later reported that during the early morning hours, around 3 a.m., they heard sounds that resembled gunshots. No calls were made to authorities at that time, leaving a significant gap of over 13 hours between the possible time of the shooting and the discovery of Griffin's body. During that window, the child remained inside the apartment. Police sought to confirm when Griffin was last seen alive, and whether anyone had entered or exited her residence during those hours. The crime scene offered several critical details. There were no signs of forced entry, which suggested that the victim may have opened the door willingly or that the suspect had access. Ballistic evidence, including shell casings, was collected and sent for forensic analysis. The positioning of Griffin's body and the placement of the wounds indicated that the attack occurred inside the apartment at close range. Detectives canvassed the apartment complex to gather witness statements. Residents were asked about unusual activity, visitors, or disturbances on the property. Some confirmed hearing noises overnight but did not identify anyone entering or leaving at that specific time. Investigators also collected surveillance footage from nearby buildings and traffic cameras. The footage helped narrow down potential suspects by establishing who was near the apartment complex during the critical hours of interest. The child's presence in the apartment was also factored into the investigation. Authorities confirmed that she had remained in the residence from the time of the shooting until police arrived. This fact was central to additional charges of child endangerment that would later be filed. Detectives also sought to determine whether the child's father had visited the apartment in the days or hours before the homicide. By the end of the initial response, police had established 3 key points. First, the likely time of the shooting occurred many hours before the discovery. Second, the lack of forced entry indicated a level of familiarity between the victim and the assailant. And third, surveillance and witness statements would be essential to identifying the suspect. The investigation moved quickly from scene processing to suspect identification. Detectives examined digital records, including phone data, and compared them with physical evidence. Within days, they focused on an individual who had access to the apartment and a documented connection to the victim. This led to the issuance of warrants and, eventually, an arrest. Once officers secured the Baldwin Borough apartment on February 9, 2024, the investigation focused on 3 primary objectives: processing the scene, establishing a timeline, and identifying the suspect. Detectives began by photographing the apartment and documenting the evidence in each room. Multiple shell casings and bullet fragments were recovered from the living area where Griffin's body was found. The presence of her 1-year-old child in another room, unharmed, was recorded as a critical detail, as it indicated the child had been exposed to the incident and potentially influenced the charges to follow. Investigators turned to eyewitness accounts to narrow down the time of the homicide. Several neighbors reported hearing noises resembling gunshots during the early morning hours, specifically around 3 a.m. Despite this, Griffin's body was not discovered until the late afternoon, at approximately 4:30 p.m. This gap required investigators to determine when the shooting occurred and why there was such a long delay before authorities were notified. Detectives canvassed the complex, asking residents if they observed anyone entering or exiting the building during that time frame. Surveillance footage from cameras positioned near the apartment complex provided a breakthrough. Video evidence showed individuals moving around the property in the early morning hours, and investigators matched timestamps with the period neighbors had reported hearing noises. By cross-referencing these records, detectives identified a consistent suspect presence connected to the victim. Interviews were conducted with Griffin's close contacts, focusing on who had routine access to the apartment. This line of questioning established that one individual, Adelin Itongwa, frequently entered the residence due to custody exchanges involving the child. Family members added details about recent interactions, which allowed detectives to consider potential motives and patterns of access. Forensic specialists examined physical evidence from the scene. Ballistic testing was ordered on the recovered shell casings to confirm the type of firearm used. Latent fingerprints were lifted from various surfaces, and DNA swabs were collected from key areas inside the apartment. These measures aimed to determine who had been present in the residence during the estimated time of the shooting. Detectives also analyzed digital evidence. Griffin's phone records and text messages were reviewed to piece together her activities and communications leading up to the homicide. This included examining recent exchanges between her and the primary suspect. By compiling this data, investigators sought to identify any conflicts, threats, or indications of planned visitation. Through the combination of physical evidence, witness statements, and digital records, detectives identified Adelin Itongwa as the primary suspect. His connection to the victim, access to the apartment, and presence near the scene during the relevant hours placed him at the center of the investigation. After the investigation into the death of RaMiah Griffin began, detectives concentrated on evidence that could identify the person responsible. Within days, their inquiries led them to Adelin Itongwa. The decision to move forward with his arrest was based on information gathered through surveillance footage and witness statements that connected him to Griffin's apartment during the critical time frame. On February 22, 2024, Allegheny County Police confirmed the arrest of 22-year-old Adelin Itongwa. The arrest was carried out without incident, and he was booked into the Allegheny County Jail. At the time of his detention, Itongwa was formally charged with criminal homicide and endangering the welfare of a child. The homicide charge related directly to Griffin's death, while the child endangerment charge reflected the presence of their daughter during the incident. Following his arrest, Itongwa was held without bail. As procedure required, he was scheduled for arraignment before a district judge, where the charges were read into the record, and the court confirmed that he would remain in custody pending further proceedings. This ensured he would not be released prior to trial. Court filings released after his arrest contained the official charges, but did not outline a specific motive. Authorities indicated that their case relied heavily on surveillance material and interviews with individuals who could account for Itongwa's movements. These pieces of evidence were presented as establishing his proximity to the scene, as well as his access. Ballistics testing and forensic analysis from the crime scene were expected to add to the case during pretrial preparation. Prosecutors outlined their objective: to prove not only that Itongwa was present, but that he was directly responsible for Griffin's death. Their approach depended on combining circumstantial and physical evidence to demonstrate opportunity, means, and intent. The absence of a publicly disclosed motive did not prevent the case from moving forward, since Pennsylvania law allows homicide prosecutions without a proven motive if other evidence supports the charge. At this early stage, no defense strategy had been confirmed. However, typical approaches in cases of this kind include questioning the accuracy of surveillance timelines, scrutinizing the reliability of witness testimony, or challenging the sufficiency of forensic links. The defense could also attempt to raise doubt regarding whether the prosecution's evidence excluded all other possible suspects. Legal observers noted that the timing of Itongwa's arrest corresponded with a custody hearing concerning his daughter. While this detail did not form part of the official charging documents, it became a point of interest in the procedural timeline. In the aftermath of the homicide, attention turned to the welfare of RaMiah Griffin's 1-year-old daughter. With the mother deceased and the father facing homicide charges, guardianship became an immediate legal and practical issue. Responsibility for the child shifted to Griffin's family, who assumed care in the days following the incident. Her sister, RaMiah Griffin, publicly confirmed that she would play a leading role in raising the child and maintaining continuity of care. Because custody arrangements cannot be resolved informally in cases involving violent crime, the matter required intervention from the courts. Legal guardianship proceedings were necessary to determine who would have authority over the child's upbringing. Child Protective Services and family court officials conducted assessments, examining the capacity of Griffin's relatives to provide adequate housing, financial stability, and long-term caregiving. This process is standard in cases where one parent is deceased and the other is incarcerated or awaiting trial. The homicide also placed the family in frequent contact with social service agencies and prosecutors. While the criminal case against Adelin Itongwa advanced, the child's placement remained a parallel concern. Agencies were required to ensure that she was shielded from the details of the case while still providing her with appropriate support. The coordination between the family and authorities extended beyond immediate guardianship to include medical care, counseling, and access to state resources designed for children in such circumstances. Financial responsibility was another area of impact. Raising a young child involves costs for housing, education, and daily needs, and with both biological parents absent, the family was required to make long-term adjustments. Applications for survivor benefits, assistance programs, and legal custody rights became necessary steps. The family also had to ensure that any inheritance or financial assets tied to Griffin were properly transferred for the child's benefit. Beyond legal and financial matters, the family undertook the responsibility of preserving Griffin's identity for her daughter. Relatives outlined their intention to maintain records, photographs, and stories that would allow the child to understand her mother's life and history. This was considered part of the long-term caregiving plan, ensuring the child retained a clear link to her maternal background despite her mother's absence. The impact on the extended family went beyond the immediate legal and financial adjustments. Relatives were required to balance the day-to-day demands of raising a young child with ongoing participation in the criminal proceedings against the suspect. This included court appearances, cooperation with investigators, and managing the child's custody status throughout the duration of the case. In the aftermath of the homicide, the attention of the Baldwin Borough community shifted toward how to preserve the memory of RaMiah Griffin and provide stability for her daughter. A candlelight vigil was held at the Estoraux High School football field, which served as both a symbolic gathering space and a place of recognition of Griffin's life. The event drew attendees from different parts of her personal network, including community members and classmates, who collectively reinforced her identity as a mother, student, and resident of Baldwin Borough. Her family placed emphasis on ensuring her daughter would maintain a connection to her mother's life and identity. This included keeping photographs, personal belongings, and stories accessible for the child, as well as integrating these elements into her upbringing. The responsibility for carrying out this role was explicitly expressed by Griffin's sister, who stated her commitment to creating an environment where the child would be able to understand her mother's presence even in her absence. The homicide also created practical challenges for child custody, with the child's father, Adelin Itongwa, facing charges including criminal homicide and endangering the welfare of a child. Decisions about long-term guardianship had to be addressed. The Allegheny County Office of Children, Youth, and Families became involved to oversee immediate arrangements and to assess the most appropriate permanent placement. These developments shifted daily responsibilities to extended family members, requiring them to adapt their roles to meet the child's long-term needs. Local news coverage played a significant role in shaping the narrative following Griffin's death. Outlets such as WTAE, WPXI, and CBS Pittsburgh highlighted both the community response and the procedural updates in the case. This ongoing coverage ensured that Griffin's story remained in public discussion beyond the initial investigation, linking her name to broader conversations about family dynamics, custody issues, and community safety. The legacy of the case also extended into community dialogue. Residents of Baldwin Borough and the Estoraux area used the incident to understand the importance of identifying potential risks in domestic and co-parenting situations. Conversations around safety, prevention, and the presence of children in unstable environments gained attention, with Griffin's story serving as a reference point for how these issues manifest in real situations. The combination of legal processes, community response, and media coverage shaped the long-term legacy of the case. For the family, the priority remained centered on the child's welfare and maintaining her connection to Griffin's life. For the community, the homicide became a catalyst for reflection and awareness about safety in domestic relationships. For the wider public, the case stood as documentation of how a single incident can have consequences that extend far beyond the immediate crime scene. And that concludes today's case. But remember, this is just one of countless stories the world has yet to uncover. Here on Global Crime Venue, our mission is to uncover the facts, honor the victims who can no longer speak, and make sure their stories are never erased. If what you heard today made you think, know this, more cases are on the way that will shock you, haunt you, and change the way you look at social media and the world around you. Be sure to subscribe, tap the like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. New investigations are released regularly. And trust me, you'll want to be here when the next story breaks. Before you leave, share your thoughts in the comments. What stood out to you most in this case? Your voice keeps these stories alive. Until we meet again, stay cautious, stay informed, and never forget, justice starts with truth. Global Crime Venue, uncovering the stories behind the screen.